Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to what is our fifth in the series of the Chamber's Sustainability Working Group Talking Thames Valley Sustainability Initiative. And today we're going to be talking about the journey to accreditation. And I'm delighted to welcome our host for today is Rob Alvarez, who is Head of Site Digital Transformation and Site Environmentally Sustainability Lead at Lonza, who will be in conversation with Paul Smith. Paul is Group Quality and Regulatory Affairs Director at Owen Mumford. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Rob. Great.
I think what we can start off with is tell us a little bit about Owen Mumford and what your sustainability focus is as a business, and then how has that driven the key components of how you constructed your brand new facility in Oxfordshire?
Great. So, yeah, Owen Mumford, we're a medical device manufacturer, family owned, and was established back in the 1950s. So the family element of it comes through, and sustainability and the environment has been a key part of our journey. So going back to probably 2014 or so, when we set up an environmental steering group, which at that time was looking at how we impact the environment around us. Being based in Woodstock and the Cotswolds, it's a lovely part of the country. We have some meadows and some really nice environment around us. So back then it was just about how we don't have a negative impact on that environment, and then very quickly it adapted from there. So we started switching our energy to solar panels and renewable energy, started getting involved so that we had electric vehicle charge points at our sites, and from there it really evolved into looking at the sustainability frameworks such as the UN Compact Goals, SDGs. We're also B Corp certified, science-based target initiatives. There's plenty of various different accreditations out there, and the link between the environment and the healthcare sector that we work in is an obvious one. So back probably late 2020, stroke 2021, we started looking at building a new facility in Whitney. And that's a site that we've had for a number of years. And eventually we confirmed that we needed to increase our manufacturing capability. So that then developed into a new factory. And we wanted to make sure that we don't have any negative impact by constructing a large building in a green field. So that brought about making sure that we embedded environmental factors into everything around the design and construction of the facility, such that it's recently been certified by BREEAM, which is a measure of its social and environmental impact. So quite a long, lengthy journey with many twists and turns around the way, but it's very much a key focus for us moving forward.
That sounds very interesting. And Lonza has recently announced that it's purchased some land in the Thames Valley region, in Thames Valley Park, to build a state-of-the-art facility within the UK for development and manufacturing capability. So we're at the start of our journey, and you mentioned some accreditations there, science-based targets initiatives, which is something that Lonza signed up to validate our 50% reduction targets by 2030. So when you were going through all this, how did you go about determining what accreditations you would be looking at, and what was the process for Owen Mumford?
So if I'm honest, there wasn't a process. So what we've ended up with is no unifying strategy around the various different accreditations or frameworks. A lot of it has arisen from various different people's interests, or we're very much one side of our business. So 50% of our business we supply into some of the major pharmaceutical companies around the world, and lots of them have their own specific requirements or their own frameworks. So some of them come along for us to set to meet obligations, so that we can, for example, have a tender that goes into the NHS, while we're also some of the larger pharmaceutical companies may be more focused on frameworks such as EcoVadis. So a lot of it was from necessity. A lot of it was just ad hoc. So, for example, B Corp, we had a former director that thought it would be a good feed into some other frameworks. So really, it was a very scattergun approach. So having taken responsibility for sustainability just over a year ago, one of my key focuses has been to try and streamline what we're doing, making sure that we have an awareness of the frameworks that we need to work to, and those that we have signed up to make sure that we really meet the requirements of everything that we commit to. So we have a mixture of science-focused frameworks for emissions reduction. So the Science-Based Targets Initiative, we've signed up to, validated, and our targets are now published. But also there's other frameworks that are more holistic, that encompass broader sustainability goals. I think where the topic sits at the moment is people tend to think sustainability is very much decarbonisation, whereas when you start looking at it at a much more holistic level, there is a lot more to it than just decarbonisation, and there are plenty of challenges, plenty of things coming thick and fast as we move through up the current times. So it's trying to get the balance right between what we need to do for decarbonisation and the science-based targets, but also not losing sight of some of those maybe softer or not on the very near horizon topics, but are going to be key as we move forward.
And of course, those targets might change in the future. So it's about looking forward and anticipating where you're going to go beyond the here and now. But from what you've said, it really doesn't sound like it's a case of one solution fits all. And given the differences in other organisations, which may be bigger or smaller in a different industry to Owen Mumford and Lonza, how have you found the accreditation process, and how would you describe that process to other organisations to find out so they can identify what accreditation best fits them?
So I think the thing to recognise is the accreditation process is hugely complex and can be very confusing, particularly if you're new to it. So if you're not a large business, then it can be a lot of data needed, a lot of steps, a lot of reviews, validation of data, questions, etc. So it is a very confusing topic, and I think one of the misconceptions that we probably fell into very early on when we decided to go for B Corp certification is that would open that means we would be able to utilize that to open different doors or not get bogged down in some of the other accreditation processes. But what you actually find is they all have similar topics, similar questions, but they come from a different angle. So if you sign up for more than one, you're not going to have necessarily save on the legwork just because you've done it with a different one. So I think the key is to first define what sustainability means for your business, whether it is the emissions that you're focusing on, whether it's social impact, ethical supply chain, because depending what your focus is would depend what framework or accreditation process works best for you. Even something as simple as I mentioned earlier, we are a key supplier into the NHS. So we've seen they had their own frameworks for emissions, which came about and has evolved over a number of years. They're now very much focusing on emissions, and they also have very strict regulations that need to be met on modern day slavery. So it's kind of it all falls under the same umbrella, but they are hugely different topics. So once you've got that that definition of what sustainability means, and you've sourced what the options are, I think one of the best things to do is kind of leverage on networks and connect with various different people. So places like the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce is a great place to network. You've got different companies at all sorts of sizes, all sorts of levels, but also at very different stages of sustainability journey. So some of the larger organizations that you think will be streets ahead of some of the smaller organizations, what you very quickly find out is that's not always the case. But that's a good network to leverage on getting what the options are, what some people found of good, what some people have found haven't worked, engages with other businesses in your sector, or those just with similar sustainability goals. What I found at some of the discussions I've had is where people in your own sector may not be so open to discuss things because of confidentiality clashes or competition. When you're engaging with businesses in your area that are in different industries, different sectors, you'll get very good learnings of what they use, what their experience is, and go from there. And I think the other thing is to avoid approaching it in isolation. So there's plenty to learn from others, and that's probably more true if you're either new to processes, new to regulations, or if you're a smaller business. I think one of the things that helped us as an organization with some of these accreditations is we obviously work in a highly regulated industry. So we are used to having regulations forced on us and how you meet them. I can imagine if you are from a less regulated or an unregulated industry, all of a sudden trying to wade through all of those requirements and have people tell you what you need to do and then criticize how you're doing it and telling you how to do it differently is hugely daunting. So trying to leverage on networks and avoiding doing it in isolation, I think is probably the simplest and best piece of advice for anybody that's starting to pick up on it.
I completely agree. I think there's a lot of information there. I mean, it certainly does sound like it's a scary process because it's not going to be something that companies are particularly familiar with, which they know their day job really well, but they don't necessarily know sustainability. So I think what you said about starting from the beginning, what are your aims and aspirations, getting that defined, and then reaching out to people that can support you either locally in the network who've been there and done that, or experts in this field, I think is some great advice. But obviously, companies vary in size. Smaller companies would have potentially less resource, people, financial in order to support this compared to a larger organization. Could you elaborate more on what initial processes can be expected as part of this sustainability accreditation?
Yeah, I think the complexity and resources that come from some of the accreditations really depend on the specific framework that people choose. So I think it's important to do a lot of research up front and try and establish exactly what you need to move through to get through from where you are now to that final achieving the accreditation, which is a great feeling when you actually get that certificate or you get accredited. But that's only the start of the journey, because a lot of the accreditations then you have a cycle of having to show progress or have to show development over the cycle of the accreditation and have data revalidated. So I think for smaller businesses, what you need to do is review the data you have to hand and what data you can actually get easily, and that can then determine what accreditation works. So if we look at something like emissions and decarbonisation, that's a whole minefield in itself when you start talking about the 3 different scopes emissions. So scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 data. Depending on what the size of your organization is, I think most businesses that start looking at emissions data find that the data they have and to track their scope 1 and scope 2 emissions is relatively easily, and you can get that data and to a relatively good level of accuracy. And then scope 3 data is everything that sits outside of your control. So either side of you in a supply chain, right the way down to raw materials, or if your product goes into further processing, and that's where the challenge sits. So if you are a small business with little resource that is going to be available for sustainability, don't underestimate that if you're going to sign up to something like SBTI that is very much data driven, you're going to have a lot of data to trawl through, and it's going to take a resource a lot away from their day job if you're trying to look at doing it in parallel. I think it's also worth remembering that most frameworks that you sign up to, they will be very demanding on the provision of evidence throughout the entire process. So if it's an emissions accreditation, you're going to have to get data around your supply chain to a very high level. If it's something of a more social impact, then you're going to be looking at the policies you've got. So, for example, the two main ones that I would say that we have, we provide data for, certainly in the relatively near past, is the B Corp certification and SBTIs. So SBTIs, we have to work at a high level to trace the journey of the products that we make, be it here in the UK, or if they originate from our Malaysian facility. Kind of you're focusing on all of the emissions right the way through that. If it's something like B Corp or the NHS tenders that we do that focus on modern day slavery, that's much more policies. So have you got the right policies? Do you need to update them? Do you cover it? Do you actually go through and, rather than have a policy, do you actually have measurable KPIs that you track and trend with your suppliers, etc.? So it's quite a lot of work to go through, and then you've got to maintain those standards. I think the accreditation process kind of is a reflection of your current successes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be succeeding at everything. So a lot of these accreditations is a start of a journey. So you get on the bottom of the ladder to show that you've got processes in place, you've got some success in what you're trying to achieve, but you've also got an ongoing journey, and that journey will continue. And I think for a lot of the sustainability journeys, they are a never-ending journey. So you're never going to achieve perfection. You're never going to get to the end of it. All you can do is show that year on year you're making improvements. You are your emissions are no longer impacting the environment, but I think that end point of that bar is always going to be moving and always going to be going up.
Great. I think it's a case of achieving something is better than achieving nothing.
Yeah.
And I guess my takeaway from that was it's about understanding what the requirements are for the accreditation, starting early, and getting that data in detail captured in real time is important, because that transparency is fundamental to getting the desired results and achieving what you set out for in terms of the accreditation and your local goals. So thanks for sharing that about, and some advice about how smaller and large organizations vary and how what they can expect. Would there be any benefit in taking more of a communal approach to this and supporting each other? Because other organizations in the area have done a good job at supporting each other, and collectively and fundamentally, sustainability is in everyone's interest to achieve. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is kind of a crucial issue, particularly at the current times of when we look at what we need to do for controlling emissions, for decarbonisation. But we also look at the various different factors around the world and the geopolitics and everything that's kind of the challenges there. I think that level of uncertainty and how we approach it in trying to make things more sustainable is kind of, it's impossible to do in isolation. So collaboration and sharing practices, or sharing data, and tackling it all as a community is going to be the only way that we succeed. I think people tend to talk about sustainability as kind of quite a new challenge, but kind of if you trace back, I think sustainability is kind of just a rebranding of corporate social responsibility that's kind of arrived in business textbooks back in the 1950s. So there's nothing new there. I think a lot of it is just the challenges we face, and that whole climate challenge is kind of refocusing it, and is a great vehicle for showing that collaboration is the only way we're going to achieve having that positive impact or reducing the negative impact on the environment. I don't think any one company can achieve true sustainability and that climate control in isolation. It's about building a strong network for whether it's mentorship, practical advice, sharing of data, or just easing the burden and helping reduce what needs to be done by collaboration and really sharing the demands. I think when we look at institutes like the Chamber, I think, as I said earlier, they're a great opportunity to connect with people, with experts, or sometimes when you focus on accreditations or you're focusing on a framework, you become very embedded in that process. And sometimes when you have a discussion and maybe it's an expert, or maybe it's somebody that's coming from it new and has just got a different idea, and all of a sudden you've lost focus on a slightly different angle of it, and the simplest of messages or the simplest of questions can just trigger a rethought and a different approach on how you tackle something that may not feed into the accreditation that you're working on at that point, but will have an impact elsewhere. And the other things is accreditations are always changing the demands or the requirements. So what you may find is you sign up and something's not on the agenda, but 3 years down the line, it's a completely different agenda and it's evolved. So I think dealing with it as part of that communal effort means that where there may be people on the same accreditation journey as you, but ahead, you can learn what's coming to you maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, because they're seeing it now. I think the various different accreditations, the very different platforms are great for helping businesses navigate through a lot of the sustainability policies that are mandated either from government or from customers, etc. And as you become more effective, you become much more specialized in the knowledge and the skills needed to meet them. So once you've reached that level of expertise, sharing it in the communal way is kind of only going to have a positive impact for everyone.
Agreed. I think certainly the regulations could change externally, either through the government or internally. Your goalposts are always going to evolve, either driven through your own internal requirements or your customers as well. So
yep.
with that in mind, based on your experience, what lessons would you share about the accreditations you selected and the approach that you took? Is there anything you would do differently?
So the lessons learned, and I'm going to kind of repeat what I said earlier, is kind of identify which accreditations are best practice for either your business, your industry, or what you need to do to meet your demands of your customers. So for Owen Mumford, these include the B Corp certification, EcoVadis, SBTI, the UN Global Compact, and SDGs. So they were the foundations of what we see all of our customers and competitors in the industry sign up to. So there becomes a a certain degree of, if other people in your industry are doing it, you need to be doing the same thing if you want sustainability to become a cornerstone of what you want to be known for. Then once you've focused on and identified those frameworks, make sure they align with your strategic goals, and offer tangible benefits to your business. I think we touched on earlier that there is going to be a huge investment needed, either financial investment or time investment. So you want to make sure that investment you make has a benefit for your business, and that investment will help drive both on sustainability, but also on other performance, other factors. What we found is some of the sustainability topics that we've discussed in public or where we've been accredited with B Corp, we find all of a sudden that can offer advantages such as recruiting people, or particularly where you have new graduates coming out of university. It can be the difference between them wanting to come and work for Owen Mumford compared to somebody else, or it may be that they've got opportunities elsewhere in the country, but they realise coming to the Cotswold, working for an organisation that's focused on sustainability, gives them a better feel-good factor. And so whilst that doesn't help us achieve anything on the sustainability topic, it means that we're getting people into the business that have the same desire, the same attitude, so that we know that will help us move forward.
Certainly, I think it certainly adds a lot of value being a sustainable organisation, to be able to present what you've achieved and what your values are there, both in attracting people to work for you, but also attracting new customers. I think when you're designing a new facility, I think you need to strike that balance between what are you willing to invest in that gives you a business benefit versus what you're willing to invest in that just purely is for a sustainable reason that doesn't necessarily offer the business benefit. I think you need to understand what you're trying to achieve and present that to the right people to make that collective decision for the right reasons, and strike that balance to get that accreditation at the end of the day. So
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So if we take something like the Whitney facility we built and the BREEAM certification, by no means did we sign up to the top level of certification, because the size of the facility we're building, the focus that we're going to be putting on there, and just where it sits in our manufacturing portfolios, the investment all of a sudden becomes way out of proportion for what we're actually trying to build. So it's finding that sweet spot of, yes, we want to make sure it's BREEAM certified. We want to make sure that it kind of has that positive impact to the environment rather than a drain on the environment. But there's no point in building a new facility if that's going to take so much resource and so much financial investment from the business that we, for example, can't afford to run it, or all of a sudden we can't utilize it, or we're having to cut back other areas of the business just to cover costs that we've overstretched ourselves. So it's really finding that sweet spot of what's right investment, time, and sustainability, which is not an easy equation to balance, but is a key one to get right.
Absolutely. And I think with that in mind, and factoring in that there are different levels of accreditation, and companies will have different goals and expectations from this, what recommendations would you give to a company that's at the start of its accreditation process?
So I think the easy recommendation is kind of not to follow the path that we took, where some of the accreditations or some of the things were kind of just fell conveniently in front of us, or was seen as kind of a good opportunity. I think having an opportunistic view is not the best with sustainability. So I think certainly if I had our time again, I would be wanting to establish that unified approach, coming up with a sustainability strategy that mapped out where our efforts would focus, making sure that it mirrors and matches companies' values, but also commercial goals. That defining that clear strategy will help identify which accreditations are most relevant for you, which ones are essential based on your customer base. But I think the other thing is accreditation doesn't necessarily is not necessarily the be all and end all of it. So you can make small changes, positive changes without accreditation. So start that journey, start doing something, and then at the right time feed into the accreditation process, and it then becomes a reward for the efforts that you've done already and what you've achieved. I think what often blurs people's view on sustainability is the challenges we have around us at a global level are huge. So there is some massive work that needs to be done, and there's some massive changes that need to happen. But all of that seems very daunting until you break it down and you realize that even the smallest of changes, even if you make lots of small changes, they soon kind of make a big impact, and they kind of collectively can be easier to achieve and still have that overall desired impact of having that far outweighs what they individually appear to make.
You're right, absolutely. Accreditation is nice to have, but at the end of the day, what is fundamental is what you're trying to achieve in terms of sustainability, and making whatever changes you can and being able to credibly demonstrate that you've achieved them, because all of that adds up, and you playing your part collectively makes a big difference in what the global initiative is all about.
Yeah, even to the point of if you're a small business, just making sure that power is you're switching off power, you are switching off lights, you are not having air conditioning, heating running when there's nobody in an office, things like that, which have kind of been around for a long time. Even these days is I think where I remember kind of 10, 20 years ago coming into factories where it said turn the lights off of an evening, and here we are. That such a small change, but people still fail to do it. So when it's very easy to fall into the trap of accreditation is lots of new stuff to do, but don't forget the basics, don't forget what we should be doing and we should have been doing for a long time.
Absolutely. Infrastructure is one thing, and that will make a big difference, and replacing assets which are power hungry or water hungry will make a big difference in the design. But at the end of the day, behavioral and cultural changes are also really important to the success that we're trying to achieve. Absolutely. And I guess finally, Owen Mumford has been a key partner to the Chamber for some time now, and has helped develop the Sustainability Working Group, and also the State of the Region reports on sustainability. What would you say are the benefits to your business in being involved in such an initiative, and why should others get involved? Why would you encourage them to reach out and find out more about the Chamber and what it can offer?
I think that the biggest thing is that information exchange, getting alignment on what others are doing, just as you said, kind of starting to switch that behavior culture in that we all need to be doing something. What are other people doing? What can we learn from other people? Creating that community, because and it's a difficult one, because business communities often you have a lot of organizations will shy away from, because it may be competitors that they're worried about bumping into, or they feel that their size of their business it makes them an uneven partner in the community. But I think it's creating that network and sharing ideas and all working to the same goal, and realization that that we're only going to achieve what we need to by that collaboration. I think the Chamber does a great job. So the State of the Region report on sustainability was probably something that they've done ahead of time. And I know, having read it, and some of the stats in there are quite a stark reminder of how much, even in a relatively small part of the world, where there's a lot of businesses that still need to start the journey, and maybe that the bits of getting involved and hearing ideas, and the realization that the main topic we've been talking about is accreditation today, but just by doing a small few basic things, you're playing your part of starting a sustainability journey. So I think do something, get on the journey, even if you're not going to be accredited for it. That can come later on down the line, but interact with other organizations and learn off each other. I think that's probably the biggest thing I've picked up from working through sustainability is there's a lot of organizations willing to help others kind of start the journey, move along on the journey, or support each other on the journey.
I think that's a good take home. Doing something is important, and I think my take home from being part of the Chamber is that I have been connected with people that can help in the journey that we're about to take in building a new facility, both in yourself. I visited your facility in the last few months. We have connections with Reading University now that is a real centre of excellence in sustainability. And we've met like-minded organisations and very different organisations who all offer a different perspective that can share snippets of information and experience that can really help you think, oh, I haven't considered that, or I haven't thought about something that I did know about in a different way, such that you make the best of your assets and play your role in being the most sustainable organisation you can.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with your audience as a take home before we leave?
I think the last kind of discussion we've had is kind of the key take home. Do something, reach out, look at organizations that can help you. If you're in the Thames Valley and you've not connected with them on the sustainability, kind of connect with them, come along to the various different meetings or the different talks, and start the journey, start doing something.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Paul.
Thank you, and as always, a pleasure, Rob.